Hey dreamers, this is Anisha Jennings, a fellow immigrant and an entrepreneur. From being an engineer in India to building my tech business in the US, I've lived the journey you're on. Welcome to Your American Dream podcast, where we turn immigrant challenges into superpowers. Are you feeling out of place, struggling with a job hunt, or simply missing home? I've been there, and I'm here to guide you through it. In each episode, we'll dive into real stories, practical advice, and mindset that will help you write your unique success story. From navigating cultural differences to building a purposeful life, I've got you covered. So if you're ready to turn your immigrant experience into your greatest strength, let's dive in. Your American dream starts now. Welcome to Your American Dream. I'm Anisha Jennings, and today I'm so honored to welcome Ashwini Balasubramanian, Vice President of Research and Development for the Transportation and Energy Business Unit at 3M. Ashwini has over 2 decades of experience in global leadership and engineering management with leadership roles at Harley-Davidson, Bosch, Toyota, ZF, and Martinrea. She's also president of the Automotive Women's Alliance Foundation, where she champions the advancement of women in automotive and engineering. In addition to her corporate leadership, Ashwini is the debut author of Map Your Ascent, Embracing Change as Your Leadership Superpower, where she shares practical insights on navigating transformation with confidence, resilience, and purpose. Welcome, Ashwini. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Anisha. Thank you for having me. I'm very much looking forward to this conversation today. Thank you.
Likewise. So, Ashwini, tell us what triggered your move to the US and tell us a little bit about your journey and summarize your 2 decades in a few sentences for us.
Yeah. So this is kind of a full life circle moment. And, the date is also super significant. So I actually moved to the US on May 16th. 2002.
Wow.
So exactly 24 years ago. So this is super significant, at least for me. The date was probably one of the big inflection points in my life. So I was born and raised in India. So the first 20 years of my life, I was there. I got my bachelor's in mechanical engineering from a very rural area in India. I got it from a college called SSM College of Engineering. It's nestled on the main national highway. It's in a very small village called Kumarapalayam, and it's about 30 minutes from a city called Erode. So I come from there. I got my bachelor's in mechanical engineering. And even as a child growing up in India, I experienced a lot of change as my parents moved, especially for my dad's job. So very familiar with, how to tackle change and really started embracing change. Maybe not out of choice in my early years, right? But I think that shaped my personality to be able to dream big and look at things that maybe are daunting to people, but I thrive in those kinds of environments. So as I was doing my engineering in India, I was thinking about, okay, I really like being an engineer, but how can I push myself to the next level, right? And a conversation with a friend in Chennai sparked the idea of maybe I can go to the US and pursue my master's. So I had a conversation with my parents. They, as always, were super supportive, but I am an only child, right? So, and the thought of me being so many miles away on my own in a land they don't know anything about was super intimidating for them. So they sat me down and they said, we'd love for you to go pursue your dreams. We know you can do anything you put your mind to, but we need you to get married. And I'm like, you need me to do what? So I'm like, this isn't part of my plan. Like, I just want to go, build my career. So they said, and then it took me a little bit to say, okay, I've always trusted my parents and their intention. And I said, I don't have time to go find somebody. I'm busy in college and preparing for all the stuff that I need to do for my master's. You people go groom hunting. If you find somebody that is good for me, I will take the plunge.
Oh.
So 6 months, they kept doing what they were doing. So I was preparing for GRE and TOEFL, and they were looking at potential grooms, right? So
Yeah.
I was kind of living like a dual life. And then they actually introduced me to my now husband, Ravi. We was already in the US. He was in Detroit
Beautiful.
working for Daimler Trucks at that time. And he just happened to also be a mechanical engineer.
Nice.
So our parents introduced us. We got on a call, we chatted, and 2 weeks later, I actually proposed to him. I said,
Wow, that is
you know,
amazing.
it was a turn of events I hadn't expected, but I've always been like that. I'm very instinctive. Sometimes it might not make sense to people around me, but to me, it feels very, very correct and the right
Right.
thing to do. And I always follow my instincts, right? And your instincts are based on everything you've learned over the many
For
years.
sure.
So that's how I moved to the US. So I landed in the US, like I said, exactly 24 years ago on
Beautiful.
this day, following my husband because he was already here in Detroit. So that's what brought me here. First, the
Beautiful.
intention to further my career by doing my master's, but then also love both.
For sure, for sure. Oh, I love that. That's such a great story. And today is May 15th of 2026 that we're actually recording this. So that is amazing that
Yes,
tomorrow
yes,
will be exactly 24 years. That's beautiful.
correct, correct.
Amazing. There were not a lot of girls in the mechanical engineering. Tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about how did you navigate that? Because I don't know now, because when we were studying back then, there were like couple girls in mechanical engineering and there were the rest were all boys, right? So tell us a little bit about that journey and how that influenced your life.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think even today, like I look at the Society of Women Engineers statistics, in India, generally engineering does have a good amount of population of
Hmm.
girls. So I don't think it's an issue with girls in STEM, but essentially mechanical engineering has been traditionally known as a boys' world. So
Right,
even today, I think Society of Women Engineers publishes that only 6% of women enroll into mechanical engineering in India. So unfortunately, that needle hasn't moved a lot. When I was in college, I was one of two girls.
right.
And I talk about this a lot in my book because it was a different environment and it's not an environment that's always built with you in mind.
Exactly.
So you feel a little out of place. You need to learn how to read the room, how to navigate it. Um, and I mentioned this in my book because one of the colleagues that I had in college at that time, I remember him coming up to me when I was like actively, feverishly studying for my GRE, coming up to me saying, why are you doing all this? Like, why are you working so hard? In the end, women will step back, have babies, get married, wash dishes,
Wow.
so why are you working so hard? And that stung, right? Like
Yes.
I feel like you were reduced to everything you can do in service of others. Now, to be fair, I did all of that. I have two kids. I do wash dishes
Yes.
when I can. So I do all of that, but it doesn't mean you have to give up your dreams of what you've put up for yourself, right? So I think that was a struggle, but I did have help. Like I had a good group of friends. I had a good group of 10 girls, of course, not in my department, but in other departments that became my sisterhood. They helped lift me up when I felt low. I also had a very strong ally, my best friend. He is also a mechanical engineer, went to school with me in India. He's in Houston right now. Also, super helpful in understanding how men think and how men operate. So, he was kind of like my guide to read the room, to understand how to navigate it. And then over time, I think I just became comfortable being the only female, being
Yeah.
one of few, and we don't question it. You start trying to adapt and fit in sometimes. And I learned much later that you don't need to fit in. It's
Yes,
okay to stand out, right? Like that's essentially your unique wiring, your unique perspective. And it's okay to bring that because if you don't, you're actually doing a disservice to your organization and to your own career.
for sure. For sure. Thank you for sharing that. That is so important. And I hope, somebody who is thinking about joining mechanical engineering will be specifically inspired by you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it is such a field, Anisha. Like I think it's one of the fields that actually brings the physics and the science part of it to life. Like there's a
Yes,
lot of actual physical parts you can make and touch and
for
products
sure.
you can make and touch. I find that very fascinating.
Beautiful. Yes, for sure. And I graduated from electrical engineering. And so we were like, mechanical and electrical are like, they say, two sides of the
Yes,
same coin. So
yes.
it's
Typically
definitely very
integrated disciplines.
Yes, yes, very fascinating.
Yeah.
So you have been a part of the automotive industry. How did you get into it? And, what was your journey like through these huge companies like Harley-Davidson, Toyota? How did your journey like transition and what was your major learning through all these roles?
Yeah, yeah. I think for me, I don't think I've ever landed at a company that I've sought out to be at. It's kind of a strange thing to say. I've always thought, I will land at this company and then somewhere from the left side, I'll get recruited by a company that was not even on my radar. And I can talk a little bit about Harley Davidson because at that time I was working for a supplier company called Martinrea. You mentioned it in the introduction. So I was the global director for corporate strategy and market intelligence. And I was super happy with my role. I had a tremendously supportive boss at that time. So I really didn't have any intentions of branching out and looking at what's out there on the horizon. And I got a call from a recruiter that reached out to me and left a voicemail saying, "Hey, we're looking for a group chief engineer for Harley, and we would like to talk to you." And I actually didn't return the call because I thought it was some sort of spam. You think of Harley Davidson, you have this bias around who they would take in and who represents them, and it doesn't fit who I am, right? The last thing you think of for Harley Davidson is a petite 5 feet brown Indian woman, right? So it's very far from the stereotype that we think of when it comes to Harley. So I actually didn't take the call, but then they followed up with an email, and I'm like, sounds serious, right? And then I talked to my boss. That was the first thing I did. I had such a good relationship with him. He was such a good mentor of mine. I talked to him and he said, if you get a call from Harley, you take it. You do not ignore it. You take it. It's such an iconic company. And then you have the conversations with the people behind the product, and you realize they're just like any other product development company. They're a strong engineering foundational company that, yes, of course, has a cult like following. But at the end of the day, just like any other company, they want to make great products that delight their customers and have
For
great
sure.
engineering fundamentals. So, as long as you are strong with your foundation and your fundamentals, and you have the ability to lead large teams, I had to take the bias I had in my mind out in order to be
Yeah.
able to fully embrace that new role that came my way. So, I think sometimes the things that hold you back are very intrinsic and they're your own blockers and biases that you have in your mind. And it's important to recognize them so you can overcome them quickly and not lose out on the opportunity, right? Um,
Yes.
that's how I navigated Harley. Of course, I wouldn't lie to you. I did feel out of place sometimes because I'm not a rider. I've never ridden a Harley Davidson, right? Like I said, it was not on my radar of companies to pursue. But what I learned is I brought a very unique perspective. I was not a writer. So if we are going after new writers as a company, it would be very helpful for someone like my perspective to be added to the product development piece, how we style the product, and so on. So you really have to think about what is the value you're bringing to the role, even though you might feel like you are a culture add, not maybe a culture fit necessarily, if that makes
I love
sense.
that. Yes. I love that you pointed that out because, like you said, why would somebody contact me? And you were defining your worth at that time, which was not what it
True.
was to somebody else,
True.
right? And that bias is all of us go through that. And it's so hard to get out of it unless somebody else looks at it. So, just, your advice on figuring that out and knowing that it's just intrinsic and trying to overcome it is just golden. So, what would your advice be for someone who is, questioning their self worth and saying, oh, I'm not capable of being in this company or being VP or being president or being CEO? What would your advice be to them?
I think the first step is if you feel nervous, right? If you feel nervous about an opportunity or a role you're taking on, I think you need to recognize that's a sign of growth. And when
Mm.
you feel that discomfort in your pit of your stomach, it's actually good because it tells you you're stretching in ways you didn't think you can be stretched. No, I'm not talking about foolishly doing something where you have no skill set at all, but at the same time, understand what transferable skill sets can you bring from your past into these roles so that you can leverage those transferable skill sets, leverage those strengths, but then have the humility to say, I do not understand everything. Who are the experts that I can lean on in order to build my knowledge up about this particular product? So every time I've moved organizations, I've gone into spaces where I didn't have the product background.
Mm,
And I think the biggest lever that I have used is to say, I do not know everything. And I won't pretend to know everything. I'm more interested in making impact than trying to impress somebody, if that makes sense. So I think
right.
if you adopt that sort of attitude, you won't be afraid of seeking help, asking for the mentors, asking for the experts to lean on them, which then quickly you can level up your understanding of the product, understanding of the business and the organization, which I honestly think people really appreciate, right?
For
Of
sure.
course, they saw something in you. That's why they reached out and asked you to consider the role. So you have to
Exactly.
trust that there are aspects of your experience and your skill set that people do value. So, like I said, lean on those hard, but also have the humility to say, I do not understand this fully. And how
Yes.
can I equip myself? Right. And people
Yes.
are actually super helpful when you take that approach.
For sure, for sure. You are such an amazing example of someone who has been in a field that is male dominated, and you got married, moved to the US, had your kids, and you're managing your home, and you are in this amazing roles that you've been in the past 2 decades, and now you're vice president, and you're gonna debut with your book. So, what would be your advice? I mean, first, let's talk about your experience on how did you manage to do all of this in such a short period of time? And, what motivated you to do all of this?
I think, if you had asked the naive me when I was 18, 19 years old, what I wanted to do when I was 40, I would have said, I want to be leading a company. I want to, make sure that I am making an impact. All of that still holds true.
Mm-hmm.
But over the years, I've learned to understand that you have to pace yourself based on what life throws at you and what life brings to you. Because I didn't account for how much disruption motherhood can cause.
Yes, yes,
Not in a bad way, but it
yes,
does disrupt your schedule. It does disrupt your timeline. I've learned that you need to pace yourself. You don't need to give up your goals, but it's important to pace yourself. And it's not a race. You're
yes,
not running at somebody else's timeline. You have to
exactly.
build a timeline for your career that is comfortable for you, that is you, right?
Yes.
So I learned, I think every time, both times I became a mother, it reinforced that even more for me. And I always say, those 2 points in time in my career were probably the biggest inflection points in my career as well. Every time, I went through motherhood, I learned a different kind of skill set that I didn't know could exist, right? It
Yes,
forces you to become more organized. It forces you to say, this is not important. I have to
yes,
say no to this because every no I say there has to gain the yes next to my children.
absolutely.
So I think that clarity of saying, this is not a race. No one's going to penalize me if I don't achieve what I want to achieve in this time
Yes,
frame. I can pace it and I can dictate my career and not let my career dictate my life.
for
That
sure.
clarity, I think having that clarity has been helpful to navigate. And I always feel like I have the ability to compartmentalize as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I know I strive to be present wherever I am, right?
Yes,
So if I'm doing board work for the company that I'm, on the board for, I'm fully there, right? Like
yes,
we're talking and I'm fully there and I'm not distracted by other stuff.
right.
If I'm doing my corporate job, I'm 100% in there as well. Same with my family. So I think being able to, even though it might not be extended periods of time with
Yes,
anybody or any particular role, I think when I'm there, because I'm fully there, the impact that I can have is pretty large, right?
for
So
sure.
I think, again, going back to drive everything you're doing based on impact and not just hours, right? You can
For
be
sure.
super busy. Your calendar can be super busy.
Yes,
Doesn't mean you are effective, right?
for sure. For sure.
So being very mindful of what you say yes and no to, being very mindful of what your non-negotiables are,
Yes,
giving yourself grace if it feels overwhelming. Like it's
yes,
okay to say no and take a back seat. It's
yes,
okay, and being able to not give up on your dreams because life has thrown something at you or you've decided to take a little bit of a detour. All of that, I think, has helped me navigate all the stuff that I do, whether it's being a mother, whether it's being a wife or a daughter, daughter-in-law, or being a corporate, you know, team member, it doesn't matter. I think all of them, it's about being able to be fully present
Yes.
and giving you 100% when you're in that space.
For sure, for sure. Amazing. So both you and your husband are in these big roles and in a fast-paced engineering companies. So how did you guys navigate parenthood together? And what would your advice be to those who are, in these huge stressful roles and who want to start a family or who have a family and they just don't know how to, are just wondering how to navigate the job and parenthood? What would be your advice?
I think there are two angles I want to make sure I leave your viewers with, because I think the first one is, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on which angle you're looking at it from, women are the only ones that can procreate. We can
Yes,
give birth to kids, right? Physiologically, that's how we're
yes,
set up. Um, and the timeline to do things, wait for this to be done and then I'll have kids. I'll wait for the kids to be at this age, then I'll do this. You have to do what feels right for you. But the
exactly,
thing I tell a lot of my mentees is the right time actually never arrives.
exactly.
Because especially for women, we always have our family clock and our career clock constantly in conflict with each other. Right. So
Absolutely.
if you wait for that right time, it might not arrive at the pace you want it to arrive. So you have to make the time right for you
Hmm.
as of when things show up. Right. So when I had my first child, I did decide to go part time for 6 months. I just wanted to see, do I want to be a stay at home mom? Do I want to come back full time into the workforce? What is it I want to do? And I
Right.
very quickly realized in 6 months that for this my own sanity and my husband's sanity, I should go back to working full time. It's not that I don't enjoy being a mom. I do. It's one of the most rewarding experiences I have had. But I also feel like I need to be in spaces where I'm not somebody's something, right?
Yes.
I'm not somebody's mom. I'm not somebody's wife. And being at work allows me to fully be myself and just focus on my skills and my contributions. So once I realized that, it was easy to make the decision of what I wanted to do. Now,
Right.
on the flip side, the second angle I want to talk about is it is not free. It does come with opportunity. There is something called opportunity cost. There is cost you pay to do things like that, right? Like my mom was a stay at home mom. So I always had fresh lunch, fresh
Yes.
dinner, fresh breakfast. I don't remember ever reheating anything and eating.
Yes. Yes.
But unfortunately, my kids have always known only daycare. They've never known fresh breakfast, fresh
Yes.
food. We do a lot of leftovers. We will eat out of boxed waffles. There is an opportunity cost. But I do think that when you have that opportunity cost, when you make the most of your time with your kids when you have it, the kids actually don't blame you for it, right? They actually appreciate your perspective and they
Yes.
actually turn into adults that also believe they can do anything they put their mind to,
For
right?
sure.
Fortunately or unfortunately, my kids don't know any better, right? They've always been in this environment and I think they're incredibly kind. They don't know that they're being kind, right?
Oh.
And I mentioned this in my book. I took my son to a doctor's appointment. I even packed everything. I packed his favorite snack. We showed up and the lady at the front desk, I'm trying to check in. She says, your appointment's not until next week.
No.
I'm like, oh God. And I'm looking at my son with like a sad smile, trying to apologize. He's like, it's okay, Amma. We'll come back next week. So
Oh.
I think kids know how to be gracious in the
Yes.
way only kids can, right?
For sure.
So like I said, I have a lot of kindness around me that allows me to do everything I'm doing. But it does come with an opportunity cost, no doubt.
I love that. I love the word opportunity cost because sometimes we look at things and be like, oh, I wish I had this or I had that. But viewing these things with this positive angle is amazing. So, now coming to your book, tell us a little bit about you have a fun story of how the book came into being as well. I would love for you to share that story and then let's get into a glimpse of your book.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for asking that. Like I said, with my career opportunities in the companies that I've worked at, I did not plan to be an author. It was not in my plan at all. But sometime mid last year, Society of Automotive Engineers, they reached out to me and said, would you please work with us and write a book about motorcycles? I was still at Harley-Davidson at that time. I'm looking at them like, no, it's not a good idea. I'm not a writer. Yeah, I know enough about the bikes to be dangerous, but I shouldn't be the one. But if you truly want to write a book about bikes, I have tons of experts at Harley that would love to work with you on. And then in the same meeting, they take a pause. They're understanding my background. Said, you have a tremendously interesting story. Would you mind working with us to write a book about your career journey? And I'm like, I have not thought about that. I have no idea how to do that. And then they showed me a template where you can put a book proposal together, what the idea behind the book is. And they said, take a couple of weeks, work on this, come back to us. And if, as we get to know each other more, you'll know I don't have a lot of patience. If something's in front of me, I have to get it done, right? So in a week, I put everything together. I went back to, they said, this is really interesting, but unfortunately, we're shutting down our publishing arm. We're not going to be doing book publishing anymore. And I'm like, okay. Because like I wasn't really pursuing a book essentially, right? And they said, no, hang on. We're going to refer you to a few known publishers that we've worked with in the past. Why don't you have conversations? So I interviewed with a few publishers and then locked in with Greenleaf Publishing because of the amount of professional editing and reputation they have. So that's how the book journey started, right? And I signed a contract with them in September of last year. And they said usually authors take 6 to months to a year to finish the manuscript. And then so think of it as a 2-year project. And I'm looking at them like, it's not going to be a 2-year project. So I went from, I already had the idea because I'd worked on the book proposal and everything. So I went and I wrote the manuscript in 6 weeks. That's how fast
I'm not surprised.
my first manuscript, and they helped, edit it and so on. So the book essentially really anchors in on how to leverage change as a superpower. Like I think change is one of the hardest things for people to process. We are all creatures of habit. We're all creatures of being comfortable. We underestimate how much comfort we derive from our daily routines, right? Yes. And I do as well. But the way the book is laid out, as it's laid out into 3 parts, right? The first part of the book is about what I call my 3P framework. So the first part of the book is anchored in personality, not in a Myers-Briggs way, but more in what is your wiring like? What are your belief systems? How do you process belonging in a new place? So it's anchored around that. And I tell these stories from my childhood because, like I mentioned before, I moved around a lot in India. And for perspective, my last 4 years of high school, I was in 4 different schools.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of change, right? I've lived in many different states, many different cities and villages, and also studied many different curriculums as well. India, there's a lot of different curriculum to tackle. Yeah. So the first change was really hard, but I think it prepared me for all the disruptions to come. So it really shaped my personality about really looking at change as something exciting, right? Yes. So that's the first part of the book. The second part of the book is anchored in the second P, which I call perspective, right? So the first part of the book dwells on how my personality got shaped and prompts the readers to sit back and think about what is their wiring? What is their belief system? How do they figure out how to belong in a new space? How does that shape your personality? Now, building on that personality, I started seeking out change, right? Like the move to come to the US, the ability to move jobs, take on new challenging roles. A lot of it I sought out. A lot of it came my way. It was a good, healthy mix. Right. But that ability to process change and not view change as something to be afraid of really started shaping my perspectives, right? So that's the second P. The third P in the book is about presence. So if you understand your personality, your wiring, your belief systems, who you are as a person, and how you choose to belong in new places. And then you combine your perspectives that are shaped by choosing change in a meaningful way. I believe you can really impact your presence and how you show up, whether it is in your personal life or in your professional life. So over time, because of how this has shaped my entire journey, I think now, because of the presence I bring, the impact I bring, people do look at me as change agent, right? So if this role that I have at 3M, I believe came to me because people knew I was comfortable with change. I was good at driving change because that's the only thing we're seeing as an industry, right? Across the board in the last 6 years since COVID, it's been change after change. So I think I wanted to share with everybody how to like flip the script when it comes to change. Like, how do you embrace change? And if you embrace change truly, you can actually turn it into such an advantage and a superpower. And that can really help you map your ascent. So that's what the book is about.
So tell our listeners when your book is releasing and how they can get a copy for themselves.
Yeah. So the pre-order links are already live in Amazon and in Barnes and Nobles. So if you go to amazon.com or barnesandnobles.com and you type Map Your Ascent, or you type my name. There are not too many authors with my name either.
Yes.
That's what I found. You should be able to look at my book. The book will be in shelves in Barnes and Nobles on September 1st.
Beautiful.
But early reader copies are starting to become available now. So my goal really is to be able to reach as many people as possible so that they can sit down and think about their own journey. And the intent of the book is to not just share my lived experiences and my stories. Yeah, I use them as tools to make my point, but really there's a lot of tools in the book. For example, I talk about an opportunity filter because of how many changes I have chosen to make or I have encountered, especially when it comes to your professional career. I have a method to the madness, right? So I talk about my opportunity filter that has 3 different dimensions. And if 2 of those are not true, I have declined opportunities as well. And my opportunity filter might look very different than someone else's. But basically, it's a way to say, think about what your non negotiables are. What does your opportunity filter look like so that you have some consistency on how you're making your decisions around change and around opportunities? So there's practical tools to use, but I also don't want everybody to have homework when they're reading the book.
So if there's one major takeaway that you want your readers to have with them and, keep with them, what would that be?
I think change is here to stay, right? There's no workaround change right now. I think change is here to stay, whether it is in the form of AI impacting our lives, our professional careers, or technology pace that has been unprecedentedly fast, right? Change is here to stay. So if you take this opportunity to really sit back and think about how you can not just navigate, change is not something to just navigate. I think change is a tool that you can use to really disrupt the environment you're in a positive way. Right. So not to fear change, embrace it fully, but also be able to sit back and think about how are you going to look deeper into your own life and think about what makes up your personality? What are your perspectives? And then how can you show up with the right kind of presence in order to map your ascent? So that's essentially the reason why I wrote the book in a nutshell. And I think I would like for the readers to think about this is not just my story weaved in to provide leadership tools, but really think about the answer to really embracing change lies within yourself.
Yes.
And this book is just a means to figure out how do I do that reflection? How do I build that map for myself? And you have full control of that. I think when you feel that way, you can tackle it in a much more aggressive, better way without fear.
Beautiful. So we will have all those links in the show notes for our listeners so they can get a copy of the book. So as a woman in STEM and automation, what do you see for the future of women engineers?
I think we have made progress over the last 2 decades.
For sure.
There's no doubt. I think I do see that around me, but the pace of progress is not sufficient. Right? We still see very limited number of women on boards. We see very limited number of women in C-suite roles or leadership roles, especially in male-dominated industries, traditionally male-dominated industries. I think the way to flip that script, you have to work at it from multiple levels. You have to work at it from a pipeline standpoint is how do we build a pipeline where girls are going after those STEM degrees? They're going after those professions because they're interesting, because their voices matter, not because you want to make a point about being a girl in a male-dominated field. Right? That's not the point. Because being in an industry like automotive or motorcycles, it's just a fascinating, fun industry to be in, right? So how do you build that pipeline? And
Mhm.
then once you recruit these women into the industry, how are we retaining them?
Yes.
That's another piece. And then the last piece of it, I think, is how are we rewarding women
Yes.
for the skill set? Not because you want to hit a certain percentage somewhere or a quota somewhere,
Yes.
but truly, how do you reward them for the skills so that they can continue to thrive in the industry? So you have to work at all three levels.
For
So you
sure.
have to build at the recruitment, the retention, and the reward. Because if you miss any of these three R's, I think we haven't done this in a holistic way. And that's why the numbers haven't moved in the last 2 decades.
That's a great perspective. Thank you for sharing that. So, after 22 years, what does the American dream mean to you today?
I truly believe that this was the best decision I made to come to the US. Not because I am disgruntled with my motherland or anything like that. I think it
Yes.
made me who I am.
For sure.
But I do think the immense amount of opportunities I have had here, I'm super grateful for those and super excited. And I think we're not done yet.
Yes.
The ride still has to move on.
Yes.
And I think I'm not done pursuing the American dream.
I don't think you are.
There's a lot more to do, a lot more to accomplish, and a lot more to serve, a lot more to impact people and businesses around me. So I'm not done yet.
You're not done, for sure. Well, thank you so much for being here and, sharing your journey. It's been a tremendous journey, and you've done such a great job with
Thank you.
everything that you've done so far. And we wish you the very best on your book launch, and
Thank you.
hoping a lot of readers benefit from your book. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. As we close this inspiring conversation with Ashwini, one message stands out. Growth requires courage. Whether in engineering, leadership, or life, embracing change is often what unlocks the next level of impact. And if you're building a business, personal brand, or leadership platform and need support behind the scenes, my company is here to help. From creating strategic, high converting websites that position your authority, to managing and producing podcasts that amplify your voice, to providing team and operational support as your organization grows, we help visionaries scale with clarity and confidence. Because leadership becomes more powerful when you're supported by the right systems and strategy. This is Anisha Jennings reminding you that your American dream is built one bold decision at a time. Until next time. Thank you for tuning into Your American Dream. I hope this episode left you feeling inspired and ready to take on the world. Remember when I first landed in the US, lost and overwhelmed? Well, look at us now. We're building our dreams together. Your story matters, and I'm so honored to be a part of it. If you enjoyed our chat today, please spread the love. Rate, review, and share. Let's grow this amazing community of dreamers together. Want more? Catch my daily doses of inspiration on my Instagram @JenningsTechCorner. Also check out the show notes for more ways to connect. Remember, your accent is the voice of your ambition. Your background is your superpower. Let's dream big and achieve bigger. Until then, this is Anisha cheering you every step of the way.